Here's what's coming up in episode 195, Hocus Pocus, the sequel, and behind the scenes with David Kirshner.
When our daughters were young, this was a bedtime story for them of some kids that had lit the black flame candle and brought back 3 very evil and naughty witches. And what those witches want to do is suck the lives out of little children on All Hallows Eve. Okay, so here is one of 2 of the black flame candles.
Oh my gosh. What do we get to know about this sequel coming up?
Not sure if I was supposed to say that, but there it is.
Stop it!
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
In 1993, Disney released a film called Hocus Pocus. Because I know my audience, I know you know this film very well. I didn't see it in the theater, but I do remember renting the video around that time as a family when I was in high school. Though it starred Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy, it was pretty much considered a flop at the time, believe it or not. Since then, many audiences have discovered the film, and it can be found on cable, playing pretty much nonstop every October. It truly is a cult favorite now, and I cannot imagine Halloween without Hocus Pocus. Partly filmed around Salem in New England, partly filmed on a soundstage, it was directed by Kenny Ortega. My guest today, David Kirshner, was one of the film's producers, but was also the creator and writer of the story. He pitched the whole idea. And wait till you hear how the whole thing came about. And the new sequel we're dying to hear about? He's executive producer. Even if you haven't seen Hocus Pocus, you know David's work. If you've seen a Chucky doll or seen Child's Play, he began his career working with Jim Henson's Muppets and Sesame Street. He wrote and illustrated the series of children's books known as Rose Petal Place. In 1986, Kirshner created and executive produced with Steven Spielberg the smash hit An American Tail, which became one of the most successful animated films in history. And I got to interview him. Pour some tea, y'all. Hocus Pocus is such a treasure and a tradition for so many families and even adults who don't have kids like me, who loved the film as a kid, and it's a true classic. What was the inspiration behind the story, and how did it make its way to the big screen?
As many things started in my career, especially many years ago, when our daughters were young, this was a bedtime story for them. And they were 4 and 6, and we're a little bit like the Addams Family. We really love spooky things. From the time the kids were little, we would play a game called Hide and Go Freak, and I would turn on the fireplaces in the house, and Gregorian chants, which is kind of like monks chanting, and the kids and my wife would hide from me, and I would have to find them. And the kids would be screaming. But as they grew up, they loved doing this with friends that slept over. And many times parents were called because the kids were so frightened they didn't want to sleep over after that. But our kids were very used to it. But it started as a bedtime story for them of some kids that had lit the black flame candle and brought back 3 very evil and naughty witches. And what those witches want to do is suck the lives out of little children on All Hallows Eve. And they loved it. I tried to make them laugh with it and make it spooky, but obviously it seemed to hit the right chord for Disney when I presented it to them.
Well, first of all, I am moving in. I am.
I do that now with our grandkids. We do the exact same thing, and they just never get tired of it, and they love it. And I love doing it to them.
How lucky is your family, for real? So it sounds to me like really like all of those main elements that it started as made it into this main story.
Yes, but Mick Garris brought a lot to it. Neil Cuthbert, who came and did a pass or a couple passes of comedy, brought a lot to it, and it cannot be underscored in any way what Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy brought to it. They really just right there. Just what comes to mind immediately is when Kathy Najimy is in the witch's house and they've been brought back to life, and she says, "I smell a child." 7, maybe 7.5. And it just, they just added things like that. And it was just gold. And every time they would do another take, they would throw something else out that was so funny. I mean, Sarah Jessica Parker, amok, amok, amok. I mean, whoever thought that was going to be something so funny, but it's become t-shirts and coffee mugs and a billion other things that Disney licenses.
And my favorite is "'Tis firm."
yes, tis firm when they step on the road. That's right.
Yeah, I have some friends and a sister who sometimes when we think about it, we will do that move that she does, puts her foot on the black pavement. She's like, "'Tis firm."
You're going to have to do that for me. I do want to see that.
I will reenact it. So, I mean, did you ever, either when you were telling the story to your girls or even in the beginning of getting into the production, did you ever imagine that, for example, Bette Midler would play Winifred?
No, but there's a Polaroid picture of me at a record shop that I worked at Sunset Boulevard, a very famous record shop called Tower Records that everybody from John Lennon and the rest of the Beatles to the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, everybody came there to buy their records. And I did a drawing of Bette Midler on a bed sheet because I had an idea of a concept called Sleep with the Stars, never thinking that I had to have copyrights or trademarks or permissions from these people. But I did this drawing, and my wife found it about a year ago. And when we start shooting Hocus Pocus 2, I can't wait to show Bette Midler that drawing that I completely forgot about until a year ago that I did when I was 19 and I'm 65. So that's a long time ago.
That's so very cool.
So no, I did not dream that Bette would ever be, 10 years later, that she would be in a movie of mine from that point.
As much as I love the Sanderson sisters, for me, I almost love the storyline of Max and his little sister Dani even more than, the hilariously entertaining Sanderson sisters. And I had such a crush on Max, Omri Katz. And I loved the adorable relationship between him and his little sister, who is played by Thora Birch. And I just love the little moment they have at the end where Dani says, "You saved my life." And then Max says, "Well, I had to. I'm your big brother." And she says, "I love you, jerk face." And he says, "I love you too." And I melt every time.
No, you just gave me goosebumps with it. And it's, that jerk face is established early in the film, and then it's bookended at the end. And you really believe they're brother and sister, and it's not annoying each other, but it's a term of love at that point. And it's that whole scene at the end of the film, and I've seen the film truly probably a couple thousand times, aside from making it, that the end of that film, and I can go into specifics, but the end of that film really makes me cry. I mean, like E.T. kind of cry with Thackery Binx dying and his ghost coming back, and his sister Emily and he walk off to heaven together. I want life to be like that, or when my time is over, one day to come get my wife and walk into heaven like that. It's something that had, there was a film I saw when I was a boy with Rex Harrison and Gene Tierney called The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. And I would recommend it to all of your viewers, but it's just a wonderful story of a sea captain, a crusty, angry sea captain that has haunted anybody that comes into his house. Everybody flees. And this very strong woman moves into the house, and she'll be damned if she's going to move out because of a ghost. And what happens is that this love grows between them, and until he realizes in the end, as much as they've fallen in love, they can't be together. And at the end of her long life, and she's an old woman laying in bed, the windows blow open, the curtains rustle, and out steps handsome Rex Harrison and steps down through the window. And she has just passed away, and he puts his hand out to her, and the young Gene Tierney steps out of the body, and they step back up into the windowsill and walk up into the clouds of heaven. And that was the complete inspiration, homage, ripoff, whatever you want to call it. That so did it for me. And I always wanted to put that somehow in a story, and I put it in this.
I love that you talked about E.T. because and in my notes in front of me, I have always described it as an E.T. ending.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yes, I remember as a young child, I bawled for, I don't know, the first 30 times I saw E.T. You know, I would bawl at the end. And I think it's just a fabulous, both that in E.T. and at the end of Hocus Pocus. It is that E.T. moment, including the big film score in the background. It's just magic. And you know, the gate opening up as they go through. It is, I love it. And I love that you just told the inspiration for that. That is spectacular.
Well, your homework is to watch that movie and let me know what you think.
I do have homework because I've watched a lot of classics in this kind of genre, and I have not seen that.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, so definitely. Yeah. So the movie, and even just the visuals and the production design and the costumes and the Halloween scenes, and it's all so very nostalgic for me. And as someone who grew up, you know, a little bit earlier before that film, but still, like, I can see a lot of nostalgia from my childhood. And in communicating with you leading up to this interview, it's clear to me that the magic of Halloween has a special place in your heart, and you're sitting here in your home wearing a Hocus Pocus sweater that is all Halloweened out. I mean, did the Halloweens of your childhood find a place in this movie?
They're the foundation of this movie. I mean, my childhood friend, who I don't even remember him not being in my life, whose name is also David, we grew up trick-or-treating. We grew up decorating and just living for the winds of October to beckon us, that probably began in towards the end of summer. And just that magical night, I just remember, you know, it's just getting dark, and porch lights are a huge thing for me. Porch lights that are like lighthouses that are on Halloween, that are beacons to candy and showing what you put into your costume that night. It's so magical to me. I've made 2 Halloween specials and Hocus Pocus. And honestly, I would love to spend the rest of my career just making Halloween themed stories and working with, well, one of those stories that I did was with Ray Bradbury, who was such an inspiration to me as a kid. And for your listeners, he wrote a book that I read when I was in my early 20s called The Halloween Tree. And that also was such an inspiration for me. But it's about the history of Halloween, but not in a dry sense, but of a group of kids that travel through time and place to understand the essence of Halloween and man's fear of death. And it's, when I say death, it's not dark in that form, but it's just a beautiful story. And I was fortunate enough to work with Ray and turn it into an animated special. And it's the only Emmy that Ray ever won in his entire life with all the television work that he did. and I asked him to narrate it for me as well. And now Warner Brothers is making it as a live action film, and I'm just so excited.
Wow. Where did you grow up as a kid?
I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles called Van Nuys, and my mom still lives in the same house that I came home to from the hospital. And it was a magical time. I always think of the words from the first episode of a wonderful show that you may be too young for called The Wonder Years.
Oh, yes, yes.
It was a great show. But at the beginning of the show, what it said is they were magical years. They were the kind of years that you could go out on your bike and be gone all day and not wind up on the back of a milk carton. And I just thought that was such powerful writing. But that's how I grew up, with great friends and climbing trees and living and breathing for the beckoning of Halloween. And that is, I mean, as I've said to my friend David Henson, it's a love letter to the Halloweens and childhood that we had. And just trying to create almost a Hallmark kind of card of colors, of oranges and blacks and purples, and just the essence of what Halloween, I'm an insufferable romantic. And the idea of Halloween just spoke to me.
Well, I know just from interviewing a few people from the LA area, including Lisa Morton, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who does a lot of Halloween history and has written a lot of books. You should check out.
Actually, no, I don't know her, but I will do my homework.
Yeah, check out Lisa Morton. She has written some Halloween material and a lot of the history, and she lives in LA. And so I know that LA really does Halloween right. You know, I've heard about all the cool home haunts now and all the money, in some of those Hollywood neighborhoods that folks put into Halloween, and that it's just become this huge, almost like a theme park, in some of these neighborhoods. That's amazing.
I live in one of those neighborhoods that is so Halloween crazy. And there's a street called Trigo in my community here, and they closed down the entire street. And there's probably at least 100 houses on the street, but everybody tries to outdo each other with their haunts and themes of Ghostbusters and the Ghostbuster ambulance parked in front that they've rented, and giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Men rising above their homes. I mean, I'm saying it gives me chills, but just to go with our grandkids, our oldest is now 14 of the grandkids, but from the time they were in strollers, and just to see the wonder in their eyes and to live it all again. I can't get enough of it. Honestly, if I ran the world, Halloween would be 365 days a year, but I guess that it wouldn't be as special, but it would in my mind.
What do you and your family do for Halloween?
When our girls were little, we would have a blowout party for all the kids in their classes and the kids in the neighborhood, which is about 150 kids. And we had actors and friends, moms and dads also, that would be part of everything. As the kids got older, this is where I'm at now, which is when the kids were like 12, 14, we started to really make it more spooky, and we would do guillotines and electric chairs and, really scary people in complete prosthetics walking around the yard. And, when we stopped doing it, because at that point, the boys began to get out of hand, and pizza would wind up in the pool and on the roof. And finally, we just said, you know what, we got to take care of our house here. But I think the parents were even more disappointed than the kids, because they were able to relive their Halloween on that night, visiting with their other friends, hanging with their kids, but they just so loved it. And to me, that's the beauty of Halloween. Honestly, Patrick, it is a non-judgmental holiday. You could dress as anything in the world, and no one's going to say anything about what you're wearing, no matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter anything. You can be anything you want. And there's where Christmas oftentimes comes with guilt of the holiday. Some people have depression with the holiday. With Halloween, there's none of that. It is just pure joy. And we all kind of meld into being kids again on that night. And wow, I mean, that's just fantastic. And just to think that all of that began at the time of ancient Egypt, and then the Celts in Ireland and Northern England and Scotland, and the witches in Germany, and the cemeteries and the celebration of Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. It just all over the world. And in this oyster with this sand, all of this turning into something that would become this beautiful pearl, this orange pearl that would become Halloween to us. And yes, I guess you could say companies make a fortune from it. It's commercialized. Who cares?
Right.
We're having the greatest time in the world. When I first sold Hocus Pocus, I said to the heads of the studio, Halloween is now $1 billion industry. I don't even know if they heard the rest of the story. They just heard, wait, it's $1 billion industry and we don't have a film out there yet with this. And soon they would have the magnificent Tim Burton film, Nightmare Before Christmas. But Halloween now has become a $10 billion industry. And that is because it's just for everybody. And it really, if you go into I don't know if you have Rite Aids there and CVS's there or whatever your big pharmacy chains and grocery store chains, but decorations begin to be sold towards the middle of August now. And people just begin to get into the spirit of all of this. And, how wonderful is that?
And many of us who really like to let our freak flag fly on Halloween start planning the next Halloween the day after Halloween is over.
I'm with you there. I am with you there.
What is it like working with Kenny Ortega? And I'm sure, have you worked with them more than just this one time?
No, just this once. And look, when I worked with him, he wasn't Kenny Ortega, the Disney legend. I mean, it's an official title.
Yeah.
He is now part of the Disney legends. I mean, it's like being knighted. And he was not once did he ever lose his cool, always just so positive and happy. But, he would go on to, he did Newsies before us. And prior to that, I mean, he was one of the great choreographers of the last probably 50 years. But, from Michael Jackson, who he also directed the documentary on Michael, after Michael so sadly passed away, This Is It. But, Madonna, just so much. I mean, Dirty Dancing, he was the choreographer on. But he took all of those elements and put them together with, Newsies and then Hocus Pocus and then High School Musical. And then, he did the amazing Descendants 1, 2, and 3 for Disney. And that are so much fun, that were so huge on the Disney Channel. And now he's just signed an enormous deal at Netflix. So it'll be exciting to see the magic that he brings there. But he's truly one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet. And he would fit so perfectly if he were sitting here with us talking about all of this, because he has all of that same passion for Halloween and joy of childhood and fun.
Oh, I would love that. And I'm hoping to round him up too. That would be so cool. And oh my gosh, Newsies. I could do a whole other 5 episodes on Newsies. But that's not our genre. That would just be some other nerdy genre. So one of my listeners is really interested in knowing if Thackery, Binx, and his sister Emily were a part of the original story from the beginning.
Yes, no, from the very beginning, Thackery was, I cry over dog food commercials. I love animals so much. And I found a stray black cat that I named Inky. And that cat was my inspiration for Binx, which is black and ink, Binx, together. And my mom gave me the name Thackery because I said, I'm looking for a name of a kid around this period. And my mom's a great writer. And she said, let me get back to you. And like 5 minutes later, she called me. She said, what do you think of Thackery? I said, I love that. And honestly, if we had a son, I would have named him Thackery. I love that name. But yes, Mick brought in the sister. That was not part of my original story. In my original story, just the wishes turned him into a cat. And Mick came up with a great idea of there must be a reason for that. And so he came up with Emily, who who passes pretty quickly in the beginning, but that's what turns the witches young, or as Bette Midler says, when she looks in the mirror, when Sarah Jessica Parker says, "We are young and beautiful," she looks in the mirror and she says, "Well, younger." And I always love that. So yes, Thackery was always from the beginning, and the great Mick Garris added the element of his sister.
We are just recording the audio for this. You know, this is a time when I wish this was a YouTube show for sure, because behind you is such a cool looking room, and I'm looking at a life-size Billy behind you. I can only imagine that since you have a life-size Billy, that also kind of did that come out of your brain as well?
Tony Gardner, who has worked with me forever. I mean, I did my drawing of Billy Butcherson. His original name was Billy Butcher, because I really wanted the audience to be terrified of him, and not till he cuts the leather stitches out of his mouth and moths come out do you realize that don't judge a book by its cover. He's really a good guy. But Tony really honed that and brought that to life. And Tony has worked with me ever since Hocus Pocus. I mean, we've done a lot of films together, and he's up in Toronto with my partner, my Chucky partner right now, doing shooting the series up there. But he's a brilliant puppeteer as well. When I first presented the story to Disney, the executives walked into a room that I'd asked if I could get in there half an hour before. And you've been in office buildings, and they have those kind of ceilings. I'm not sure what they're called, but I hung 2 witches' brooms, and I hung a vacuum cleaner that had the motor removed. That was a Eureka upright from the 60s. And they walked in, I had the lights turned down, and on the table, I had bought a candle just at a grocery store. And then I did all of my intricate illustration of crazy, weird, occult-like, strange things and wrapped it around the candle. But first I put it in the oven and kind of toasted it so it's old and parchmenty. And I made 2 of those. And Disney used, actually, they didn't even have their prop people make one. They used the one that I had created, and they have in the Disney archives now. And I have my other one sitting right over there.
Shut up.
And I also went in with my book and with the eye in it and the whole thing, which I can show you later. But I was just trying to bring them into Halloween. And I had a shopping bag, like the kind that we would trick or treat with before there were fancy things to put your candy in as there are today. And I had the kids on the block and our kids draw witches and a black cat and just all these spooky images made out of crayon or drawn in crayon on a shopping bag. And my wife, Liz, bought like 15 pounds of candy corn, and I filled it almost to the top. And then I tore the bottom of the bag and I made a serpentine design in front of where the executives would be sitting. So they walked into the room, and I wanted them not only to see their childhood again, but to smell their childhood. And as you know very well, candy corn just evoked Halloween. They walked in and heard the story. I had my storyboards, and I had a big black cauldron with a green light in it. And I also had dry ice coming up. And I really wanted them to see what was in my mind for this story. Disney had passed on the first story that I ever created, which was an American tale about a little mouse who comes to America that I was very fortunate that Steven Spielberg bought.
Yeah.
And once Spielberg bought it, they called me and said, "Okay, we made a mistake. Is there anything else that you have?" And I said, "Oh gosh, I don't really." I said, "Well, there's a story that I tell my kids," and they said, "Well, come in, we want to hear it." And I think they only wanted to hear it because there was Spielberg pixie dust on me. And so whenever I do a presentation of anything that I've ever been a part of, I always do 3-dimensional figures and artwork, because I really don't trust the executives' minds to step into my mind. As much as I try to be very clear with what I'm saying and wave my hands around a lot, that's how I talk, I want them to understand that. And so when they walked in, they seemed pretty excited before I even opened my mouth by what they were seeing in front of them. And again, when I began with that Halloween is $1 billion industry, that coupled with what they were seeing, and this is Jeffrey Katzenberg. Jeffrey Katzenberg would be responsible for the revision of Disney animation from Little Mermaid and Lion King going to Broadway and everything that he did. And then he went to DreamWorks and did the same there. So honestly, I was very fortunate to have people that were so open and kind in being interested in that presentation.
And aren't we so fortunate and glad that you went through that effort to put those visions in their mind? And even like one of the things that one of my listeners wanted me to make sure I told you was thank you. Thank you for this magic, this gift that we all have. And I love that story of how you introduced it.
Well, that's very nice that your listener, your fan, said that, because the truth is, if it wasn't for all of those people, Hocus Pocus would not be here. It would have been a movie that came and went. It was released the same weekend as Jurassic Park in July, which is not a great time for a Halloween movie. And the reviews were not good. It's probably the worst reviewed film of my career. And it barely made any money. And yet, about 5 years later, I think Disney just thought, okay, Halloween, we'll throw it on the Disney Channel and, fill up some space there. But people started to pay attention, and then it began to grow and grow. And I don't know about this year, but last year it ran every single day of October. And on October 31st, it ran from 6 a.m. until midnight. And I don't know if you've ever been down to Disney World to see what they've done with the Hocus Pocus villains, Spectacular. But Disney, as only Disney can, against the castle and images, and the Sanderson sisters, the stories the Sanderson sisters decide to put, since they're back for one night and one night only, even though they're there for 6 weeks, 2 shows a night, they decide to have a dinner party. And who are they going to invite to this dinner party? But the greatest villains in all of Disney villainy. And they create this fantastic evening of song and dance. And every year it sells out. I signed a deal with them for 6 years, and it's just coming to an end, and they're renewing that. And Hocus is also going to be going to Broadway, I can say.
Stop it.
I don't know what COVID has done to all of that, but just prior to COVID, that was the plan, that Disney will be taking it to Broadway with Tom Schumacher's group, who did Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and all the rest, Aladdin, and his group is brilliant. Anyway, I look forward to sitting in the audience and crying my head off with that. And it's got to be said also, the score to Hocus Pocus is a fascinating story. There's a guy that worked with me. I was chairman of Hanna-Barbera, the animation company that Warner Brothers bought from us. But a young guy by the name of John Debney. And John was doing Saturday morning cartoons, the scores for us. And he had done the Jetson movie, and he did my Ray Bradbury piece, The Halloween Tree. And I really wanted him to do Hocus Pocus, because the great James Horner, who I'd worked with, your listeners will know James Horner, because normally most people don't know composers, but James wrote and won the Academy Award for Titanic and the amazing Celine Dion song. Anyway, James got a project that was much bigger than Hocus Pocus. And he said, David, I'm sorry to do this. We worked on 5 films, but I have an opportunity here to go make another film that has a much bigger budget. And I said, no, I understand. I said, but can you just do one thing for me? And can you just write something for Sarah Jessica Parker's character to lure the children? And he wrote Come Little Children.
I forgot about that. I knew that and I forgot.
Yes. And anyway, so he kind of, James left about, bottom line, John Debney had about 2.5 weeks to write the entire score to this film. And he did it in 2.5 weeks. And that score that everybody loves, including the witches, the soundtrack to their walk, and just all of the music is him. And every year, my wife and he and his wife, we sit and we go to, at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, the Disney Magnificent Theater, they show Hocus Pocus for 12 nights straight. And it sells out. I mean, you can watch it at home for free. But people dress up as the Sandersons, as Billy, as the kids, as Thackery Binx. And John and I hold hands at that end, and we're both crying our heads off. And it just feels so good that we have that history and we're sharing that emotion with our wives on either side of us that are just smiling with tears in their eyes at their 2 10-year-old boys that still have that soul of Halloween in our hearts.
Well, let me just tell you, between talking about the film score and talking about a possible future Broadway show as a musician, and like my gay heart just is fluttering talking about this. And I cannot wait to go tell my husband too, because he will be losing his mind. That makes me so happy. Oh my gosh.
And that makes me so proud.
That is amazing. I can't wait.
That you will share that with your husband. That makes me so proud.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait. Finish this line for me. Are you ready? Twist the bones and bend the back.
Oh
my gosh, did I stump you?
I think you did. Well, there's the ibbity dibbity or whatever that is. I've never remembered it. And people have asked me this. You're not the first one. I need to memorize that. It's twist the bones and bend the bat. Rid him of his baby fat. But I can never remember when the girls jump in with her and say ibbity bobbity, whatever. It's not ibbity bobbity because that's ripping off another Disney property, but it's ickety something. I can never do it because I think I'm just so mesmerized when they do it.
Give him for black as black, just like
this.
That. Yes. Love it. Were you advised by, this was another listener question. Were you advised by any actual witches, and did research go into writing the spells and chants in the movie?
No, that honestly was, a lot of that was Neil Cuthbert, who came up with really fun limericks, if you will, with that. I didn't. I don't think Mick did. I think that's all Neil Cuthbert. But the research that I had done was just books that I bought on the occult. But as I drifted more and more into that, it all was really, really dark. I think I took from some ancient book the idea of with the black flame candle from the fat of a hangman, and maybe Mick did. I can't answer for him with that. But I will tell you that when we were shooting in Salem, because we shot in Salem, Marblehead, Plymouth, and then back on the major sound stage at Disney where the witch's house was built and the cemetery. There were a group of Wiccans that came and were protesting the fact that we were trivializing something that they believed in greatly. And, that certainly wasn't my intention to ever make somebody feel as if we were making fun of it. We weren't. But, the idea of North American witchcraft through the lens of a Hallmark lens, that's really what I wanted. That's what I was inspired by. And animated characters and witchy poo from H.R. Puffin stuff. Yeah, so many of the Bugs Bunny cartoons, they did Halloween. Chuck Jones did Halloween witches. And I grew up with all of that. And it all had its effect on me. And, my hope was to kind of take a little different tact on these witches that in their vanity want to be young and beautiful forever. And they have no problem sucking the lives out of children to get there.
Well, I can only imagine that, you mentioned the Wiccans that seemed to be offended at the time. I'm quite sure they've gotten over it at this point because they probably love it. But Tim from my listenership wants to know if there were ever any complaints made by Christian fundamentalists at the time.
Yeah, yes, there were. There were. I think just the idea, and it's not like there were pentagrams or
right.
Look, it's all symbolism. In my mind, it's just all man's imagination of. It's something that I say when I speak at colleges. But from the time we've climbed out of the primal ooze, we've looked to the heavens and tried to believe in something greater than ourselves. And the idea of what happens after this life, after Grog, the Neanderthal, was being chased by a woolly mammoth and his body had just been trampled on. What happened to him? And I think we've never stopped thinking of that and the idea of heaven and such. And, it's inspired amazing literature. And it inspired it for me, certainly, with that ending that you and I spoke about earlier. certainly the last thing I'd ever want to do is offend anybody with anything that would look as if it were evil or whatever. But I also think it's the stuff that makes our imaginations grow. But no, there's kind of the fun stuff of the wonderful late, great Gary Marshall, who plays the devil. His wife is being played by his sister, Penny Marshall.
That is hilarious, by the way.
Yes. Of course, the girls think that's Master, that's the devil. But, it's Halloween and it's fun to dress up no matter how old you are. And your listeners should know Gary Marshall, created Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and directed also Pretty Woman, and just, so much. And, honestly, I say these things and it still gives me goosebumps just to be able to work with people like that. And I still pinch myself, even though I'm a senior citizen now. It's still amazing to me that I got to work with folks like that. And they all added in their different ways to that magical production.
Well, you can be sure that this story and this project has put, the amount of positive energy and joy that it has put into the world doesn't even come close to maybe some offense that may have been taken. So
I wish you could have told my 10-year-old self that, 55 years ago, that I would grow up and be able to be fortunate enough to do something like that. It would have made me feel very good. But thank you for even saying that.
Were you judged for having these kind of magical thoughts in your head growing up?
I wasn't a sports-minded kid. I loved being able to draw with my dad. I lost my dad when I was I just turned 14, and my dad passed away, and he was my great hero because he and my mother both understood me, and that I was a kid that loved putting on puppet shows and loved drawing and creating worlds. And, I think a lot of parents, especially when I grew up in the 60s, they want their kids to be football players and or soccer or whatever else. And I think that's great. I just didn't have any interest in it or not an ounce of talent for it. So I really was blessed to have parents that really encouraged me and bought me my first 8mm camera when other kids were getting baseball mitts and whatever. And they really encouraged me to be the person that I am.
Awesome. You have been interviewed so many times, I'm sure, about Hocus Pocus, and I wondered if there were any interesting behind-the-scenes stories left that fans might not know. Because you were probably involved quite a bit with the daily production, right?
Yes, I was. I mean, I was going back and forth. I mean, I was in Salem and Massachusetts when we shot all of that. I was, as I said earlier, chairman of Hanna-Barbera, but that's 10 minutes away from Disney. So I would drive over there for hours every day. And the people that owned the company were very understanding and very supportive of that. But yes, and, Thora Birch remains a dear, dear friend. She has had dinner at our home with her husband, her wonderful husband, Michael. Yeah, it's for the 20th anniversary, we all got together and Disney showed it on the lot. And they advertised that they were going to show the film. And as Disney tells me, with under 10 minutes in a 1,200-seat theater, all seats were sold out. So they decided they would do a second showing, which I was shocked that the first one sold out. But the second showing, same thing happened. And they said we could probably do this for another week. And because there are so many fans. And, Disney created a limited edition poster. And, we signed them for hours for all of these amazing fans. And we're coming up on, I think, the 28th anniversary of Hocus Pocus. So that's pretty exciting. Just about, and your fans could probably go, and listeners can go online and look at this, but Disney did, for the 25th anniversary, in a cemetery, they held a fantastic, it looked like a Lady Gaga concert. They brought in stages and people were dancing and they had all of us, and Kenny was the MC of the evening, and it aired on the Disney Channel and ABC as well, I believe, since Disney owns that and everything else. That was an exciting evening what happened was they advertised that, and 5,600 people showed up, and they were only allowing 2,200 people in. So a lot of people were sadly turned away. But it was pretty magical to see. I'll send you some photos if you'd like to see it.
Excellent. Yes, of course. You mentioned something earlier that I'm sure is going to pique some listeners' ears, but fans of Hocus Pocus have been waiting for information for years about a sequel, right? And it's always been so secretive, and things come out that aren't true. And you started talking about the sequel, which we know there's a sequel coming out, but it sounds to me like you know some stuff. What do we get to know about this sequel coming up?
All three of the Sanderson girls are coming back. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy. Thora Birch is going to be a part of it as well. Not sure if I was supposed to say that, but there it is. And I think Disney has some other important information that they will drop as we get a bit closer to that. But we start shooting in fall in Rhode Island and Salem. Yeah, it's just staggering. I think my dear friend John Debney, who did the scores, I said in the first, will be coming back. Tony Gardner, who created some of that fantastic makeup on Billy Butcherson, will be coming back. My dear friend Lynn Harris is going to be producing it. I'm executive producing it. And it should be pretty great. And it will be on Disney Plus, and with a really healthy budget, and which we didn't have the first time. But boy, Disney, as they do with all their magic, they're putting so much behind this.
And so you'll also be shaping the story of the sequel too, then, I'm assuming.
Well, it's all based on what Mick and I created. And so, yes, and there's also new blood coming in, and I've read the script, and it's fantastic. I'm so happy with what they're doing.
Do you believe in the paranormal, and have you had any paranormal experiences?
Well, many things live in the corner of my eyes.
Oh, okay.
If that makes any sense. Think about that for a second. It's funny because my wife is the most grounded. She's an MBA, and I'm a guy that just sits in a room and draws pictures and writes stories. But when Liz sleeps, she sleeps with one foot sticking out of the bed, so I guess her foot could breathe. I personally find that one of the most irresponsible things a human being can do. So I guess the answer is absolutely. The times that she has slept around the corner, because we live around the corner from our daughter and son-in-law and grandkids, like 30 seconds away. And when she has slept there, I have every light in the house going. Shh, don't tell her I said that. But it's not that she has any problem with me being frightened of everything. She just thinks it's such a waste of electricity. And in my mind, it keeps the demons at bay. But I am no different than I was when I was 10 if I'm alone. But at times have I felt the presence of things. I don't think of people that I've loved, that I've lost. I haven't experienced that, though I'm way more than open to it. But to dogs pups that I've just loved so dearly that are no longer here. And Liz has felt this as well. We'll be walking up a staircase and we'll stop because we hear the sound of those paws running behind us. We turn around, there's nothing there. And it's just like,
yeah. And
when I said that, she goes, oh my God, I experienced the exact same thing, which shocked me because she's very black and white.
Yeah.
And where I'm just kind of orange and black. So yes, I am very susceptible to being frightened and the desire to believe. I've always been taken by the concept of seances and I know that, most of it is just hocus pocus, but it's really, I think that's why Disneyland, my favorite ride is the haunted house, because of the spirits will see you now. And I just, yes, do that to me.
So you certainly believe that there is other stuff out there. There is magic out there.
Yes. And I love reading about it. I wish I could experience it. When we were in England once, I said to both girls, there's a cemetery here that goes back to the 16th century. Let's go back tonight at midnight and we'll walk through the cemetery holding hands and we'll go and touch the back wall and then we'll come back out. Well, our younger daughter, Jessie, who lives around the corner, did not want to do it. Our older daughter was completely game for it. And, but it was a really witchy night, very, very windy. And we were both terrified. It's not that we saw anything, but boy, we still talk about that. And she's somebody that believes that, and this story, when she was 3 and a highly articulate child, the first time we brought her to the ocean, we were standing on a cliff and we showed it to her and we said, just like in your book. And she said, I've been here before. And I said, no, we've never been to the ocean before. And she touched her head and she said, no, a long time ago, I was here and I hurt my head.
Wow.
And it's just like, oh my God, let's go get ice cream. We were terrified. My wife and I had goosebumps. Every time we tell the story, we get goosebumps. Yeah, and she's a big believer.
That's awesome. There is a question from a listener who I am embarrassed to say that I did not think of this question. It is an amazing question to end on. You created the Sanderson sisters in your mind. And so if you were a witch and could cast one spell, what would it be?
To have the life that I have now with my wife, children, grandchildren, and pups forever.
Wow.
Immortality, I suppose. And I know that comes with lots of issues with others. Let's just say my wish worked for a moment. With all of our friends and family members, that would not be covered under that, the Immortals plan. But that said, to freeze this time and for all of us always to have each other.
You might need some kind of black flame candle for that.
I have one here, actually.
Do you have anything you want to promote coming up and any final thoughts you might want to leave my audience?
There's 2 projects that we're doing. I mean, I've done Chucky with my partner, Don, who created it, and I created what Chucky looks like. I created his design. Don Mancini and I have the Chucky series. That's the first time we've done television. And then we're going back to doing, I signed for another feature, Don and I did. That will be out this Halloween. And then next early spring, if all goes well, but it looks like it's going to, we are doing Curious George. If you have listeners out there that have young children over the last 15 years, actually, we've been on PBS and then Hulu and now on Peacock at NBC. We've done our series for, I think, close to 400 episodes we've done of Curious George, but we're now doing a live action Curious George. And George himself will be computer generated as an image to look like an adorable baby chimp. Everything else will be live action. And Andrew Adams is directing it, who wrote and directed Shrek 1 and 2. So that's very exciting for us. And but the production doesn't begin on that until next spring because we're still working on the screenplay right now.
I have been almost shaking during this because I'm so excited for where it's going and the beautiful energy that you have given me and the stories that you've told. And so I just want to thank you for that energy and for allowing me to be here with you and have this moment because this is so very cool. So you rock.
Well, you rock, and thank you for your graciousness, your intelligence, and to bring me into the homes of your listeners. I feel so fortunate. I mean, this is like Hocus Pocus is like my children. I love talking about my kids. They're wonderful human beings, and Hocus to me, which is, I may have started it, but there have been so many people that have contributed so much to it for it to be what it became and has lived on to become. And now there's another generation that is involved in it. And I truly thank you for keeping the magic alive. Happy Halloween.
At this point, and I had no idea this was about to happen, David gave me a tour over Zoom, a tour of the dreamy workspace in his home. On YouTube, I've published the highlights of this tour, but here's the whole thing in audio form. I've never experienced anything like it.
Okay, so here is one of 2 of the black flame candles.
Oh my gosh.
And, if you like this, it's just going to be a yellow flame. But Disney added the animation of the black flame. And
that's what you created when you went into pitch?
Yeah, this is
awesome.
I first sold Hocus Pocus in 1983, and it would take 9 years before it was made. I just heard recently that Leonardo DiCaprio had passed on the role, but I didn't even know he had been offered. But Disney has their casting, and here is book that I made for the presentation, and
holy wow!
It was my drawing, and then I have great people that make this stuff. And then I'll show you what I showed Disney for the new film, but they just said, too scary, David. Too scary. Can you hold on one second?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's right here also.
I'll stay here all night for you. Are you kidding?
So this is, it's called a zompkin, and it's a zombie pumpkin that I had created for the new film, but they just said, David, that's terrifying. But that's what it looks like. And the heart would pulsate this reddish orange in the center of it. But, this is the stuff that I love to do. And then this, if you and your husband are ever out in Los Angeles, you come and you have dinner with us, and I can show you the animation test I did of this. This is a character like Book, but I named Broom. And it's a neurotic broom that has no eyes, but this is its nose. And it sniffs everything. It can sniff fear or whatever, but it's like Don Knotts. If you know who Don Knotts is, I mean, you're pretty young there. But it's like Don Knotts as a broom, and just a very jittery, neurotic broom. And I did a CGI test to show them, which really made the whole room laugh. But I don't know if it's going to make it or not in the script, but we'll see what happens. It's expensive to do, all that CGI of that kind of animation, but I don't tend to think budgets. I just kind of think, and then people tell me if we can do it or not.
Is this your office?
This is my office. Yeah, this is here.
Because it is like heaven.
There's one of the costume for Bette, one of the costumes for Bette from Hocus with a broomstick there. Here's close-up of Billy, if you could see that.
Yes, what a magical world. Oh my gosh.
This is from An American Tale. These are all the figures that I did for Spielberg for when I first presented it. And this is one of my favorite things. Can you see that?
Yes.
What it says?
Yes, just look at what genius hath.
You're a genius hath. H-A-T-H, hath wrought.
Oh,
Steven Spielberg. And it's just like,
wow.
At first, I would never dream to ask him to sign anything. and I didn't. He sent it over as a gift. And it's one of my favorite things. And then this is all the licensing from, everything that I've done, from Pirates of Dark Water to Hocus Pocus, my Hocus Pocus tennis shoes that Disney gave me. This Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera and I, and Ted Turner, a note from Ray Bradbury, Neil Diamond. This one, I usually don't go this far, so you tell me if you want me to stop.
Oh, I'm telling you, I will stay. I will not sleep tonight if you keep going.
This Michael Jackson was my partner and friend, and one weekend when we were up in Neverland, and he adored our daughter Jessie, the one who lives around the corner.
Yeah.
He had a special custom golf cart made for her with flames on it for whenever she was up there. Anyway, I love Peter Pan. That and A Christmas Carol are probably my two favorite stories ever written. And he presented me that night with this Peter Pan book. And it says, to David, to me, you are Peter Pan. You are magical beyond words. Let's be friends forever. Michael Jackson. He had the most beautiful handwriting.
Oh, my gosh.
This is Gene Kelly and I. Because he choreographed an animated film that I did. He couldn't really even walk very well, but he completely choreographed it. Ted Turner and I, the characters from Page Master, Curious George, my first project, Rose Petal Place, all the Chucky stuff. And not all. I mean, this is I make my wife crazy, but because I have so much. Wait, oh, here it is. I've moved everything around, but
who has to dust all of it?
By the way, this is my first. This was the drawing I originally did. Can you see that?
Yeah, if you put it down just a little bit. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's Binx.
It's Binx, but my original concept was that he would have a tuft of white hair that was a crescent moon.
Yeah.
It was too expensive to lock down with rotoscoping for the budget we had anyway. I mean, it could be done, but so anyway, it was like having a play date with you. So thank you for indulging me with all of this.
I very much appreciate it. This has been like...
Well, you're a passionate man, and I love that. And, I love hanging with people like you. I just love people that have that kind of heart.
Well, I appreciate every moment of this, and I'm glad I got this little tour. I can't tell you I'm totally freaking out, how excited I am and how cool this was. And you spent your time doing this for me and my listeners. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity. It's been so much fun. And I'm going to work on getting my spell down on Twist the Bones and Bend the Back.
I had a few other ones I was going to throw at you too, but I thought, I don't know, maybe he might want to brush up before I throw those at him.
I probably should. It's funny, after 1,000 viewings, you would think I would have especially that, but I still can't do the ickety, whatever it is.
Well, there are Broadway stars that went and performed in the same show for years every night, and then you ask them a line and they can't tell you the line, so I believe it.
Well, thank you for at least saying that. Whether it's true or not, but thank you for my sanity.
I want to thank David Kirshner for sharing his time, his energy, his kindness, his stories, and for inviting us into his creative space. I am hoping to have one more Hocus Pocus related episode out soon, but it just hasn't happened yet. So I don't want to say too much, but cross your fingers for me, please. Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/bigseance. Daryl, James Deacon, Genesis, Natalie, Kim Robb, Josiah Lorenzo, Susan Davey, and Amy Park Gedeke. My supporters at the parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlorguests, are Linda of shimmeringmoons.com, Ann Rekovich of ozparatech.com, Denise Sia of Raven Haunts Paranormal, Janae Michaels of Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Chelsea from Cheers with Chelsea, Sarita Cockerham, Christine Rath-Selhe, Mitchell Coombs, Christine Ferrens, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cassie Keller, Melissa Armour, Diane Rax, Nettie, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Jim Budd, David Rubenstein, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond there's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I have 6 awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level. Peggy Hagan, Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, Kevin Gilbert, AJ Meredith, and James Wilfong. So thank you, Peggy, Glenna, Steve, Kevin, AJ, and James. And thank you, Paranerds. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of Paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.